Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for keeping us on time. It's always great. So, Deputy Minister Como, obviously you know what I'm going to be talking about. It's AIM Mountain, AIM in general, salvage licenses across New Brunswick. It's been, I think, an eye-opener what happened in St. John with AIM St. John. There's an extensive report that came out, which was, well, pretty revealing. A lot of data that came out of that, and obviously it hits the community. I'm hearing it on a daily basis. As we know, AIM Moncton, unfortunately, is in an industrial zone, which has been industrial probably for the past 80 years, but I would say it was light industrial. However, when we gave a salvage license to the new owners, that changed. And obviously, the type of activity on that piece of land has changed. And I think has changed that it's been really tough on the residents. They transport by train, they bring some debris or product there. You can stop at the train station for 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 25 minutes. I've seen up to 25 minutes up to now. We see that it brings noise, significant noise levels. We had the debris piles have been reduced, yes, but as of this week, we see the debris piles creeping up again. We have a lot of concerned citizens, people in those neighborhoods, which I think when they bought their house 30 years ago, they didn't expect to have such a heavy industrial activity in their area. Yes, we are doing our due diligence, and I think that's where my questioning is going to be on the on the Department of Public Safety. Are the operations in St. John, is the operation in AIM St. John, are they operating today?
If you're talking about the Port of St. John, the answer is no. The license to operate under the license under the Salvage Dealer Licensing Act was revoked by Minister Austin. There is another site in St. John at which I believe AIM is operating. They were subject to fire marshal orders to do certain things by last month, met the requirements of those orders, and I do believe they are operating at that other site.
So at the Port of St. John, so why did we canceled or void their permit on the Port of St. John?
I'll ask you to forgive me in advance. I'm going to be more than usually cautious in selecting my words on some of these files. Minister Austin was acting in a regulatory and a quasi-judicial capacity in exercising his authorities in relation to the Port of St. John site, and that decision to revoke that license the clock is still running on a potential application for judicial review of his decision. He has not, in relation to the other salvage dealer sites to which the department began paying much closer attention after the report of the task force in December. The decisions thus far have been made by the fire marshal and agents of the fire marshal on his behalf. So just really quickly, at the risk of oversimplifying, there's a lot in the AIM task force report about the fire at the Port of St. John and the attachments, a lot to learn. From the point of view of our department as a regulator, the main thing that jumped off the page at us is the risk of fire from scrap vehicles that we didn't fully appreciate collectively. I mean, the fire marshal knows there's a national fire code, and that it involves maximum heights and widths on stacks of scrap vehicles for a reason. But by and large, as a department, that the risk of fire was not fully appreciated, and in particular, the risk of a fire of such a size and intensity that it would exceed the ability of the local fire department to extinguish it in a timely fashion. Those two things were a huge wake-up call, which is why in the few days after the release of that report, while people were figuring out what was appropriate to do with the Port of St. John operation, inspectors went to every salvage dealer in New Brunswick and looked specifically for a few things that were potentially connected to risk of catastrophic fire of that size. Went to almost 90 sites, it might be 87, but it might be 90. Went to roughly 90 sites, all the licensed sites, and found 10 at which there were concerns about significant fire if the conditions weren't adjusted, and made orders in respect of those 10. The best news is that as of now, at all 10 of those sites, that risk of catastrophic fire has been reduced dramatically, as in we see substantial or full compliance with the National Fire Code in the areas, the half dozen areas that we recognized as the biggest risk. Comma, period. What remains is the reality that all those salvage dealers have multiple responsibilities, not just to meet the National Fire Code around the size of piles and the like, but there's more in the National Fire Code. There are more requirements of salvage dealers for safety, compliance, excuse me, and environmental compliance. And there's obligations they have, those that operate in municipalities, to comply with zoning bylaws. So my interim report would be that we believe we've very substantially reduced the risk of catastrophic fire that threatens communities at all of these sites. We are by no means finished with ensuring that all the other risks to the quality of life in the communities that these operations are also all mitigated to the point where it's tolerable to every reasonable neighbor.
Thank you, and you're right. If there's one thing that the report on the Ames St. John, Port of St. John, definitely made us realize is the enormity of the fire and how lucky we were to have access to water right with the boat that was right there. So coming back to, for the people that are listening, it's really important that you just enumerated some causal issues that people have worries for. So who actually does these inspections? So obviously for the height of the piles, it's the fire marshal. But on noise, on smell, on the water course, I wouldn't say alteration, but water course, that there's some product going in a water course. Who takes care of what?
Nobody. So I'm going to suggest that there's a third lesson I mentioned about the risk of fire and the risk of catastrophic fire. The third learning from the Ames St. John Task Force report is the importance of collaboration and communication between agencies. So I would say since December, we talk about, but we do not worry about whose responsibility it is to see to this one thing versus the other thing. Technically, anything in connection with water courses is environment and local government, and anything in connection with noise or traffic is municipal bylaw enforcement, and smell could be either of those two, and fire is definitely JPS and other things. But the truth is that anyone who holds a salvage dealer's license has to be complying with the laws of New Brunswick continuously as a term and condition of their license. So our approach to these 10 sites where we identified these risks has been to communicate with our friends at ELG and our friends in municipal governments as best we can and encourage each other to do our work to the maximum of our abilities and communicate with each other. So ultimately, if, for example, the city of Fredericton is unsuccessful in bringing a salvage dealer site into compliance with its laws, or ELG is unsuccessful in dealing with a site in Bathurst or Moncton, then we would fall on Minister Austin's authority under the Salvage Dealer Licensing Act. And so what I would say is we are trying to be very systematic, very collaborative, and also very fair in taking step by step to reduce over time the risks associated with each of those sites.
Just for clarification, how many salvage license operators is there in New Brunswick? And I think we reviewed 10, right?
Yeah, there are 88 licensed sites, and we have been to all 88. So we started, the first thing was a triage. We're going to all 88 and looking for the most catastrophic, the most high-risk things, which were high and wide piles of vehicles, frankly, and a few other things, but I know you'll forgive me for oversimplifying as usual. We went to all 88, detected 10 at which we saw significant risk, and we've focused since then on those 10, but we're also going back to all 88 to bring all of them into compliance.
So just to clarify, who goes back? Is it the fire marshal? Is it people from GPS? Is it people from the city? Or is it people from ELG? So who goes visits these places?
The answer is all of the above. Got no control over, but we have some influence, we hope, over our friends in municipal governments. But we are sending, not duplication, JPS sends some combination of fire inspectors and inspection and enforcement officers who have authority under the Salvage Dealer Licensing Act. I know that ELG sends environmental inspectors, and those three theoretically completely separate teams don't function like three completely separate teams. They keep each other in the loop and are working to make sure they don't duplicate each other's effort or go at cross purposes, but they take careful notes and they share it to the extent of their ability with each other.
Yeah, to your point, collaboration is so important because obviously we have all these actors. It's like being the MLA. It's having the citizens come to your office and, you know, you're looking at the different actors that are dealing with this. And I think people don't really underestimate the enormity of how government is influencing or is operating or is witnessing or is investigating into this. And to your point, it's hard to do that magic wand because you have so many actors in government sometimes. It's a frustration, but I know in the long term, government still has the best interest, I hope, for that neighborhood. So on specific for Moncton, you know, we've been sending a lot in emails, due diligence is being had. So I know you can't maybe answer because they're still in front of the courts, but those the 10 sites that were challenged, how do you feel that, you know, are they attaining what the criterias that we were to secure on fire, noise, smell, and all the above the criterias?
So the best news is I'm confident because of the number of inspections repeating that at all 88 sites, the risk of catastrophic beyond the capacity of the fire department fire has been reduced dramatically. And if I had before and after photos to show you, I would show you, but that's measured in, to follow the Port of St. John example I mentioned, the piles of vehicles are visibly smaller in height and width That the purpose of those national fire code provisions is to allow, to recognize there's risk inherent in stacks of vehicles of fire, and to allow for the effective control and ultimately extinguishment of those fires. All 10 of those sites had unacceptable levels of risk of big fires in December. None of them have that now. That's the good news. That's sort of, check that off the list. Is there going to be a fire there someday? Well, maybe fire could happen. But if there's a fire, the Office of the Fire Marshal, responsible for the fire code compliance, is very confident that if there's a fire at any of those sites, it's within the capacity of the local fire service to manage and extinguish. There's still a lot of work to be done. We're going back. There are other concerns. They're legitimate. Everything that comes into us from multiple channels. We get them from MLAs. We get them from citizens directly, coming at ministers, coming at inspectors, coming at us multiple different directions. It all gets assigned to inspectors for follow-up. And just because that risk of community-threatening fire is now dramatically reduced doesn't mean we're done working. We're not done working. All of those complaints are going to be followed up, and if there's continuing non-compliance, then we'll bring them into compliance using all the tools at our disposal, with the priority being what's a safety risk, and we won't stop until we get there.
Thank you very much, Deputy.